A very busy morning.
Yes.
We're going to get to traffic and weather in just a bit, but we are starting with this breaking news. The Key Bridge in Baltimore, it has completely collapsed.
You just saw the video behind us. It happened right before 1:30 this morning, and we know several people ended up in the water.
They don't really know how many people they're looking for. So we've been saying these numbers, these are estimates. I can tell you that one person did come out of the water.
The preliminary investigation points to an accident. We haven't seen any credible evidence of a terrorist attack. Our administration is working closely with leaders from all levels of government and society to respond to this crisis.
The webcam video of the crash and collapse seems not real, but it is. You can see the dark outline of the ship approaching, heavily loaded with containers. On the bridge, the blinking amber lights of an 8-member pothole repair crew, and then 2 cars crossing just 10 seconds before calamity. The Francis Scott Key Bridge over the outer Baltimore harbor, crumbling on impact. Responding firefighters not believing what they see.
Be advised, the Key Bridge is gone.
Quickly, 2 people are rescued. One is badly injured, the other uninjured. Baltimore's fire chief calling in search teams from across the region in hopes of finding the rest of the workers believed to have gone down with the bridge.
We are still very much in an active search and rescue posture.
Look at the conditions search crews are facing right now in Baltimore.
Yeah, 7 News Chief Meteorologist Veronica Johnson is taking a look at the conditions over the next 48 hours. VJ?
That's right. Yeah, ever since early this morning, I'm looking at live information here now. NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, they've got some buoys out in the water. So when we look at the water temperature, it hasn't been just chilly, it's been downright cold. Look at the current reading at 47 degrees for the Patapsco area there. 47 degrees, and in fact, when you're in water like that, your temperature drops 25 times faster than if you were just out in the air. So that's what the water does.
Whenever there is a tragedy, we come together.
Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott there speaking at a vigil tonight. The pastor of this church saying this was a must-have meeting to come together and support the victims' families.
Well, devastating. My church is only about 500 feet away from where the collision happened, and so getting text messages, phone calls from community members and congregation, it frightened me, so I said there was something that we had to do as a faith community.
7 News on your side has been bringing you breaking news updates of the bridge collapse for almost 24 hours, and you can see our reporting about the impacts that the collapse could have on our area online at WJLA.com. Let's go back to the studio. Let's get to John Rogers at the Alert Desk, who's been looking more into the victims and, of course, their backgrounds. John?
That's right, Scott. Today we're learning more about these victims of this horrible tragedy. 38-year-old Maynor Yasser Suazo Sandoval is from Honduras, and he lived in the U.S. for 18 years. He was married with 2 children, an 18-year-old and a 5-year-old. And there's also Miguel Luna from El Salvador. Now, CASA, a nonprofit group that serves immigrant families, says he's from El Salvador. He's a husband, a father of 3, lived in Maryland for 19 years. Now, we're also learning more about the others. The Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they released a statement saying that 3 victims were Mexican. 1 was rescued alive, but the other 2 remain missing. We also learned that 2 others are from Guatemala. The Guatemala Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent this out last night. We're told it's a 26-year-old and a 35-year-old, both from Guatemala.
It was a minute and a half after the ship lost power that the pilot on board sent a radio call for tugboat assistance. It was then the Pilot Association dispatcher who called the Transit Authority police duty officer. He shared the warning immediately with other officers who then acted quickly.
Hold on traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching. It just lost their steering. I'm en route to the south side.
It was then that the duty officer remembered the workers filling potholes. These are the radio transmissions over the next few minutes.
10-4, is there a crew work on the bridge right now? Yeah, if we can stop traffic, just make sure no one's on the bridge right now. I'm not sure where. There's a crew up there. You might want to notify whoever the foreman is, see if we can get them off the bridge temporarily.
Once you get here, I'll go grab the workers on the Key Bridge and then stop the outer loop.
C-13 dispatch, the whole bridge just fell down. Start, everybody. The whole bridge just collapsed.
It was 3 minutes from warning to collapse. We now know cars were stopped, but the officer had just begun to warn the work crew. A warning Governor Wes Moore says saved at least one life.
One of the survivors who I had the opportunity to speak with, one of the things he mentioned to me was as he was moving off of the bridge and literally saw the bridge fall right after he moved off, it was because it was a first responder who was telling him to move off of the bridge.
Meantime, divers have now recovered the bodies of 2 of the 6 construction workers who were on the Francis Scott Key Bridge when it collapsed. According to Maryland State Police, the bodies were found trapped in a pickup truck in about 25 feet of water near the bridge's middle span. They were identified as 35-year-old Alejandro Fuentes and 26-year-old Dorlian Cabrera. The 4 other workers are presumed dead. That includes Maynor Sandoval, who was originally from Honduras but had been living in the U.S. for 18 years, and Miguel Luna, who was a father of 3 and an immigrant from El Salvador. As far as the other missing men, authorities say based on sonar scans, the remaining vehicles with victims inside are encased in the superstructure and concrete from that collapse.
The Port of Baltimore has been setting cargo records. It has been a very, very busy place. You know, supply chain, all of that, that term we learned over the pandemic. I mean, this is the hub of all of that. Imports, exports, cars, containers, goods, durable goods, consumer goods, food, all of that coming in and out of this harbor. And right now it is essentially blockaded by this bridge that has fallen into the water.
And one expert tells us that the impacts of the closure are staggering. With the Port of Baltimore shut down.
Yes, ask.
U.S. Naval Academy Professor Jay Falls says we could see multi-million-dollar impacts at least, since the port brings in hundreds of millions of dollars a year for Maryland alone.
Baltimore is a major port, especially for car carriers, for all sorts of agricultural goods, for lots of commodities. And so having a port of this magnitude shut down, it just has so many ripple effects.
The really interesting moment tonight was when the NTSB discussed the fact that this is what's called a fracture critical bridge. In other words, if one part fails, the rest of the bridge then also fails. Look at that video of the collapse and you'll notice how quickly when the portion that impact was made collapsed, so did the rest of it. That is not the design that they like these days for bridges.
And in response to the bridge collapse, Singapore says it will launch its own investigation into the container ship Dolly. And officials from Singapore and from the company Synergy will be in Baltimore to help with the U.S. investigation. And we're also learning that the U.S. Coast Guard examined the Dolly last September and did not report any problems. But in June of last year, the ship was inspected in Chile and was found to have issues, including with the propulsion, some gauges, and thermometers.
Yeah, I-Team investigative reporter Scott Taylor has been comparing the rebuilt Sky Bridge with the Key Bridge, and he joins us now with what he has learned. Scott?
Yeah, we've been looking at both all day long. Now here's the Key Bridge before it fell apart. Now these are called dolphins right there, 2 of them, and they protect the bridge, but they are not attached to it. When a ship runs into it, the dolphin is designed to slow down the ship before a collision. Now, the Key Bridge only has a few dolphins, as you can see, and there is some distance between the dolphins and actually the bottom of the bridge. So that bridge is out there, and when a ship is out of control and it misses a dolphin, it could hit the bridge. Now, take a look at the replacement Sky Bridge that opened up in 1987 in Tampa. It has a lot more dolphins surrounding them. You can see them all over the place. It also has this barrier right here that protects the bottom of that bridge. Now, the big question for investigators, was there enough dolphins around the Key Bridge, and were they big enough? Safety experts tell us the bigger the ships, the larger your dolphins need to be to stop a collision.
From food to fuel, Alex Del Sordo and his team at the Anchor Bay Marina and Hard Yacht Cafe just a mile down the river from where the Key Bridge catastrophically disappeared Tuesday morning.
We all rushed down here.
Jumped into action when they realized they were needed.
Fuel is really important for all these people out here. We were servicing the fire department, police, Coast Guard has been through here, Army Corps of Engineers, and a handful of EMS individuals.
The focus not only on feeding and fueling first responders during these long days and nights on the river.
Bathrooms, showers, a place to sleep, a place to do your laundry.
But also offering a sense of calm and comfort.
And we do have pizza and wings today.
This place is a staple in this community.
To the Baltimore community as they navigate this new normal in the days, weeks, and likely years ahead.
There's folks that their living is fishing, their living is being on the water, and by having that bridge disrupted in the middle of the harbor, I mean, your whole life adjusts and changes. The impact to this community is forever. I mean, it's going to be forever.
The stakes remain incredibly high. The Port of Baltimore is still busy as containers continue to come and go by truck. But that commerce will soon slow without ships coming and going. Two highly placed sources telling me there is hope the bridge can be cleared. The shipping channel reopened within weeks, not months, by cranes lifting the bridge sections out of the way. But publicly, nobody will commit to a schedule.
When could we see a new bridge open again? 7 News I-Team investigative reporter Scott Taylor spent the day talking to supply chain experts and construction engineers to put together a timetable for us. Scott, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's $1 billion question, isn't it? Here's the Key Bridge before it collapsed. And a lot of people love this bridge, just a beautiful old bridge. But the experts we are talking to say we are going to get away from the Key's truss bridge design. Look at that. They believe the new bridge will be a cable stay bridge, just like this one. It's down in Tampa. Now, construction might only take a couple of years. The Francis Scott Key Bridge and its collapse will continue to hamper supply routes across the nation. Up until this week, it was the second largest continuous truss bridge in the U.S. Billions of dollars of cargo in and out of the Port of Baltimore. Supply experts believe the direct effects of no bridge will be felt the most in the auto, machinery, construction, and coal industries.
We are getting a better idea of the immense amount of work needed to clean up the huge piles of steel, concrete, and other debris. Good evening. I'm Scott Thuman.
And I'm Megan Clark. Behind us is a rendering of what happened early Tuesday morning. You can see the ship heading for the bridge, and then that tragic collision happens. But tonight we are now diving below the water to get a look at what is sitting on the river floor.
Yeah, the Biden administration has approved $60 million for emergency work, all based on what happened here, as we again show you this animation that really simulates not only the movement of the ship, the collision, but then that bridge coming down and a look underneath the water to show just how extensive all of this work is going to be. Our Maryland Bureau Chief Brad Bell with an up-close look today at a piece of equipment that'll play a major role in this cleanup, the now famous Chesapeake 1000 crane. Brad?
Yeah, look, this bridge took years to build. It went down in seconds, and it is going to have to come up quickly somehow. So they're bringing in some of the heaviest equipment available, and you're right, we got a chance to see it a little bit up close. It is a massive project, and massive equipment is now being mustered to do the job. This crane, called the Chesapeake 1000, has the ability to lift 1,000 tons at a time. We've seen other cranes also being moved into place around the bridge as well. And on land, these machines, which will play a role in shredding all of the steel and concrete brought in by barge.
Today, a group of construction workers gathered in Baltimore to honor the lives of the workers who died in the bridge collapse. And they highlighted the dangerous yet critical work they do, noting that many work during the less safe overnight hours to limit construction delays during the daytime.
About the enormous contribution that the immigrants made to this country, how together we U.S. border workers, we build this country.
Now, 8 construction workers were on the bridge at the time of the collapse. 2 survived. 2 who died were recovered Wednesday, and search efforts for 4 others who are missing and presumed dead have been paused.
Well, in light of the collapse, we are now taking a look at how these kinds of bridges and barges are inspected around the country. In Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin has said he did check on the condition of bridges in the Commonwealth. He says the state does inspections yearly, and all the bridges passed inspection this year.
7 News I-Team uncovered a disturbing trend. Thousands of bridges crossing American waterways have the same vulnerability as Baltimore's bridge. And despite updated standards and warnings from regulators, our investigative reporter Mitch Blocker found that these fragile bridges continue being built.
State inspectors and federal engineers thought the Francis Scott Key Bridge was protected from a ship strike. They knew the bridge was one of 17,000 American bridges engineers call fracture critical. These bridges are fragile. They don't have any structural redundancy.
The thing about fracture critical bridges, engineers tell us, is if one of the structural components fail in a bridge like this, the entire thing falls.
The National Transportation Safety Board's initial take is the missing structural redundancy was the Key Bridge's Achilles heel. The NTSB's chair said we should stop building fracture critical bridges.
The preferred method for building bridges today is that there is redundancy built in.
Yet the National Bridge Inventory shows at least 221 fracture critical bridges built over America's waterways in the last decade. Some are as busy as West Palm Beach's Flagler Memorial Bridge, carrying more than 17,000 cars a day over Florida's intercoastal waterway. Others as mundane as this Virginia bridge in Fairfax County. Google Maps captured the span on Mount Vernon Road being rebuilt in 2022.
One of those new fracture critical bridges that was built in the last decade, it is right here in Washington, D.C. It is the Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge carrying South Capitol Street over the Anacostia River.
While engineers tell us fracture critical bridges are not inherently dangerous, they haven't been the standard build for decades. The new standard has been in place since 1991. It was engineers and regulators' reaction to another cargo ship crash that took down Florida's Sunshine Skyway Bridge in the 1980s. The guide specifications for vessel collision design of highway bridges got an update in 2009. Its most significant guidance: that bridge structures be designed to prevent collapse.
When you're designing new bridges, you may make the piers robust enough that they can take a hit.
But bridge engineer Andy Harriman knows most fracture critical bridges were built before the new guidance.
Now they would have to do a analysis if they're designing a new bridge, and sometimes they go back and retroactively fit bridges with better protection systems. Probably right now the states are reviewing their navigable waterways right now just to make sure that they're covered and maybe setting up a priority list.
Maryland transportation officials say that's exactly what they're doing, and that the Chesapeake Bay Bridge remains a priority. Built in the 1950s, it is the busiest fracture-critical bridge along America's longest shipping channel. In an emailed statement, the Maryland Department of Transportation tells us all bridge projects, including both new construction and rehabilitation work, are designed to incorporate the latest safety requirements for protection against impact. Federal Highway Administration records show the Bay Bridge has adequate pier protection from a ship strike. It has the same rating Baltimore's Key Bridge did.
There are ways to protect it. It's all money and the degree and the size of the vessels that are approaching.
The size of these cargo ships really emerged as a risk for fracture-critical bridges in 2016. That is when the Panama Canal was expanded, and now it allows some of the largest container ships in the world to pass through it. Just a decade ago, it's very unlikely that the Dolly, the ship that took down the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, would have even been in Baltimore because it wouldn't have fit through the Panama Canal. For the I-Team, I'm Mitch Blocker, 7 News.
Right now, fortunately, we are not dealing with an ecological disaster, but so much remains unknown.
I took a deep sigh of relief when I saw that the ship had not ruptured or sank. And so as long as they're able to get that off the water, I think we'll be in good shape.
Gary Bellin with American Rivers is an expert on urban waterways. While officials say they've observed a sheen on the water, the Dolly's fuel tank remains intact.
If there becomes a hole in the ship or it starts to leak fuel oil, that's a whole other question. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that doesn't happen.
The ship is carrying dozens of hazardous materials containers. Federal officials concede that some of those containers have sustained damage, but according to experts on site, continued water and air quality monitoring presently shows no ecological concerns. 2 massive absorbent barriers are in the water, making sure any hazardous materials remain in check. Other protocols are in place in the event that there's a fuel spill. Some of those materials include soaps, resins, perfume, and batteries. Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action says advocacy groups are keeping a very close eye on those water and air quality results.
Hazardous materials could mean a wide swath of products. What we've heard in this case is that they're mostly corrosives, flammables, and some miscellaneous hazardous materials like lithium-ion batteries.
Ranson says with birds, fish, oysters, and crabs calling this part of the Patapsco River home, the massive salvage operation to come and bridge rebuilding to come present additional layers of concern.
What type of machinery are they going to have to bring in? What type of disruption is that going to have to the channel?
Tonight, we are learning more about what the Dolly's crew was doing and how they were feeling before the tragic accident. 7 News I-Team investigative reporter Scott Taylor tracked down a group from the Catholic Archdiocese that has been in constant contact with the crew before and after the accident. Scott, any word that what they saw, any issues before it left the port?
Not one word of any issues, and the crew seemed happy to be in Baltimore and was looking forward to their trip to Sri Lanka. Days after the Dolly collided with the Francis Scott Key Bridge, members of its crew of 22 were still on board. They remained to do routine maintenance. Andrew Middleton with the Apostleship of the Sea is one of the few that has spoken with crew members of the Dolly before and after the tragic accident. 7 News was one of the first to report earlier this week that sources who helped load the Dolly at the Port of Baltimore witnessed power outages throughout the ship, traced back to malfunctioning refrigeration containers.
Not during the conversations I had with them and speaking to the volunteer, no one seemed concerned or expressed any issues with the reliability of the ship.